Bathing suit shopping was far less painful this year. I hit 200 pounds, and I haven't seen this weight in a really long time. I'm not craving sugar like I used to, and the energy I have is off the charts. Yes, these are just a few comments from my clients, but they all have one thing in common. Each of them decided it was time to stop making excuses and to prioritize their health and well-being. We are in the driver's seat when it comes to fitness and nutrition. Let me show you what worked for my many clients and me. This is not a diet. These are sustainable strategies you can take with you for a healthier, fitter future. Join me for my next 6-week midlife reset. Go to the show notes of the episode or reach out on Facebook or Instagram. I'll be waiting for you. Health, wellness, fitness, and everything in between. We're removing the taboo from what really matters in midlife. I'm your host, Michelle Folan, and this is Asking for a Friend. You know the old saying, bigger children, bigger problems. Not sure anyone prepared us for the sometimes arduous task of parenting adult children. And despite our best parenting efforts, there may be situations where the adult child can be a physical and emotional drain with no solution in sight. The topic was requested by a listener, and when I put it out there that I was interviewing an expert in this area, I received plenty of messages saying there was great interest in this subject. Dr. Gail Saltz is a clinical associate professor of psychiatry with the New York Presbyterian Hospital and psychoanalyst at the New York Psychoanalytic Institute, best known for her work as a relationship, family, emotional well-being, and mental health wellness contributor in the media, where she frequently shares her expertise and commentary on the mental health aspects of current issues and news. She is a best-selling author of numerous books, including her most recent, The Power of Different, The Link Between Disorder and Genius. Dr. Saltz is the host of 92Y Regular, live psychobiography series, and serves as a medical expert for the Physicians for Human Rights. She is also the host of The Personology and the How Can I Help podcast from iHeartRadio. Welcome to Asking for a Friend, Dr. Gail Saltz.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today.
You came up immediately on a Google search. So good for you on your SEO because it was not hard at all to find you when I was looking for an expert in this area. I gave you a brief introduction, but I would love for you to tell the audience maybe a little bit more about you, maybe any personal details you'd like to share.
Yes, I've been doing, I guess, what I would call public education in the area of psychiatry and psychology for many decades. Dealing with young children, medium children, older children is a common sort of the bread and butter of a lot of what people come into offices for. So this topic is just a very typical therapeutic question, issue, dynamic to work out. I have been, practicing for over, 30 years, as well as doing the public education, writing books, and I love what I do. I feel very incredibly fortunate that I am in a field that is both super interesting, helps people, and more recently, which was really my mission starting 30 years ago, to decrease stigma around mental health issues so that we can make progress in encouraging people to come to treatment, to talk about these issues, to get funding for research, to understand these issues better. I feel pleased that we've kind of crossed a juncture, and I think everybody is a little more able to discuss these things.
Yeah, I love that you said that about really trying to encourage people to get help, to go in for therapy. I know there is a stigma around mental health issues. I see it in people that I know, and I always try to tell my audience, look, there's no stigma at all in going for help. I think that's very brave.
Well, I would even argue that, More than half of people in this country are struggling with some mental health diagnosis. So it's hardly unique. It's hardly unusual. It's just the way our brains were designed. And there's no point in suffering more. You can suffer a whole lot less.
Were you always destined for this career? When did you decide that this was the path that you were going to take?
Well, the truth is I knew that I wanted to be a physician, and I originally did a residency in internal medicine because that is what I thought I was going to do. But when I was in my residency, there was a psychiatrist who would come around once a week with us on rounds and talk to us about the issues that were going on with certain patients. And that was much more interesting to me than what I was doing. There's a lot of mystery at the time. I suppose that, uncovering those mysteries was fascinating to me. And the brain honestly seemed like the most important organ. It still does to me. And so mental health, without mental health, what health do you have? So I just really became more fascinated by the field of psychiatry and decided to make that change at that point and go on and do residency there.
Okay. Now, and I had always wondered if even as a young child, people would gravitate to you and lean on you for things. So I wasn't sure if it was something even that happened even as a child.
I think in my family of origin, there's a lot of anxiety. And so I'm cognizant of that. I've always been cognizant of that. But cognizant of the double edge to that, which is on the one hand, you can suffer with too much anxiety, absolutely, and it deserves treatment. But on the other hand, we were and are a very driven, in many regards, high achieving, making the most of life sort of group. And I think that is not unusual if you are able to particularly treat your anxiety. And I was I think that remains interesting to me. So interesting that my last book was about this topic, that from a neurocircuitry standpoint, we may have the biological predisposition to develop a mental illness or learning disability, which can cause great suffering and deserves treatment, but comes with, in your neurocircuitry, the propensity and potential for great strengths, individual strengths, depending on what the issue is. And that has long been fascinating to me as well. And in my family of origin, at least, my younger brother, is, struggled like I have with anxiety. But he, won the Nobel Prize in 2011 as an astrophysicist for his discovery of the accelerating universe and dark energy. And so I think this incredible package, I guess I'll say, applies to many people. And sometimes they don't know it. And children can really suffer with self-esteem when they have a mental health issue or learning disability going on. But if more parents and educators understood the potential for strength, they could be helping their child play to that and maintain self-esteem, even as they're getting them help to reduce their suffering.
I think this is a great jumping off point. I'm hearing everything that you're saying. And first of all, you have a bunch of underachievers in your family. I was like, oh my gosh, you have a bunch of smarties in your family. So it's very impressive. We decided before we started recording that this topic can cover a wide gamut of situations. So I'm just going to try to hit the biggies. And some of these were input from my listeners, which I love when they do that. But when you have a child that continually makes regrettable choices, at what point do you wash your hands of their mistakes? So once a child is I'm going to say 40 years old, are we still supposed to be coaching them through their messes?
So I think washing your hands is not the term that I would use. At a certain point, right, your child becomes an adult. And hopefully, when they are an adult, you develop a more adult-adult relationship. And it doesn't mean that you're not still parent-child, which means that as an adult, you are undoubtedly more invested. You love them, right? You want the best for them. And you're more invested in this relationship than many of your other adult-adult relationships. But it also means that you're not the ultimate decider, and you can't be responsible for the ultimate decisions, which is very often painful for parents, right? That when they're seeing something go on and it's making them anxious and they can't control it, that is very difficult. But in thinking with your thinking cap on, this is an adult, and I can't ultimately control. I can offer advice when it is allowed, let's say, when it will be acceptable, or I can even offer advice and maybe they didn't want to hear it and they dismiss it, and then I'm not offering more advice. And yet I can still care. I can still be supportive when things are not going well, which is a very big difference from ownership and responsibility. So sometimes a parent will become so voracious because they feel it is their responsibility. And if the child does something that's a mistake, they have to feel bad about it. So here we get into the issue of over-identification with adult children, right? It's great to be empathic, but one can be too empathic. So empathic that you can't kind of go on with your life if your child's life is not going on in the way that you would want for yourself. And that is hard. I mean, that is hard. We just have huge swaths of parents who are understandably super invested in their child doing well, so invested as if it's themselves, that they can't make that separation. So it's a two-pronged approach, I would say. You have to question yourself, am I being sympathetic or am I being overly empathetic, literally standing in my child's shoes and can't separate? You want to aim for sympathetic. Can I advise my kid as in the fact that I'm wiser and older and have lived more of life and can bestow that kind of advice upon my child? I think your child never gets too old to have a discussion like that with you. But at a certain point, right, if your child is like, well, I've decided for these reasons I'm doing it this way, whatever this way may be, or I just threw myself headlong into some really lousy choice, you can't own it, because if you own it, you feel mad at them. And if you feel mad at them, you can't be reasonably sympathetic. So you can say, oh gosh, that's really hard. I wouldn't have done it that way. But I'm sorry that you're struggling with those ramifications now. I guess, this will further inform, future thoughts, decisions, whatever. But still be sympathetic and if I can help you now, I would help you now. Not sure if you want that. Not sure if you feel you need that. I'm here. I'm your parent.
How do we best handle the disappointment, though? Because you're at lunch with your friends and they're all talking about, John's doing this, he's doing so wonderful. And, oh, Nancy's getting ready to have a baby, blah, blah, blah. And then you're over there going, my child, it's just this constant disappointment. How do we overcome that?
So herein, it's pretty hard not to think of your child as a narcissistic extension of yourself, right? As part of your own ego, and understandably, and so the upside of that is that parents really enjoy being able to say, "Look at what my product did," and that's understandable. I don't want to throw a harsh on people's pleasure, but at the end of the day, our children are not our clones. And they don't belong to us in that sense. And they aren't an extension of us. And we make mistakes. And I think, boy, that's so important to be able to be honest with your children about. You make mistakes. Maybe they're different mistakes. They'll make different mistakes. And I think that being more authentic has its own value. Your friends may or may not be being terribly authentic. I mean, people like to talk about the good stuff. Nobody likes to talk about the bad stuff. They may not be sharing with you other private, unhappinesses, because it's just not the way, it's not as pleasurable.
Oh, this is so true.
So, I think that, first of all, you want to respect your child's privacy to a certain degree, right? So I think some things you frankly shouldn't be sharing with your friends. But also I think that being authentic makes you closer often with your friends. If you have friends that are judging you for having a child that is not performing at whatever level they think their child is performing, judging you negatively, then, that's a limited friendship, right? That's not the friend that's really in your corner, loves you for
right.
you, So you have to think about that as well. And then what matters to you? Like being able to be authentic and be understanding and come to your own mindset that life doesn't turn out perfect for anyone. We could be talking about a million different realms, right? It's making the best of the things that go well. It's shoring up and helping to manage the things that don't go well. It's managing the curveballs that come at you because they will. And really, your main goal is that you'd like your child to suffer less, no matter what their age is, and be proud of being the kind of parent who would do that, which does not mean joining them at the hip. And so, you can privately know that you're having more struggles and that they're hard, but you're managing them, you're coping with them, you're helping yourself be resilient, you're helping your child be resilient. I feel good about that.
Yeah. And if dealing with, say, a substance abuse issue or actual mental illness, and the child is not willing to address it despite your efforts to get them, help.
Yeah.
Then what do you do? Because it's so frustrating.
So herein, I'm often talking to parents of teenage children, like, this is your shot, okay? Your child's not 18 yet. You can make them essentially, right, get help. Once your child is 18, you really can't. And the system is, respecting of our civil liberties. Things have to get pretty darn awful before a court will mandate that this must happen, which unfortunately means that parents' hands are tied. Your best shot is maintaining trust in your relationship. And that means respecting that they may make certain decisions that you don't like, and you can tell them you don't want them to do that. They're harming themselves. It pains you to see them do this self-defeating act. And I mean, in terms of mental illness too, not getting care for mental illness is self-defeating. But, unfortunately, their judgment, which may be impaired and probably is impaired in the case of substance abuse and mental illness, may make that very, very difficult. You should avail yourself of all the information that's available, which is, this is part of why I do what I do in my career, in terms of everything from red flag laws, removing a weapon from the home of somebody who's at risk, emergency units that can be called, whether that's the police or a mental health emergency unit in the case of a crisis that can be called to do an evaluation, to do a check. You can offer, you will help set up treatment, you will help find a person, you will help do the things that can be overwhelmingly hard to organize when you are not doing well. You will go with them. You can do all those things. I have to be honest and tell you, unfortunately, beyond that, there may not be anything that you can do. And that means sometimes you see your child really fall harder and harder. And I am incredibly sympathetic to parents. It is so painful, and it is not your fault. And yet you may not be able to, they may have to really, as it were, bottom out.
Yeah.
To start getting help.
Right. And they have to want it. It's like with any.
I mean, if there's danger, you have an avenue. Absolutely.
Okay.
So asking your child, and I would ask them quite directly, do they feel like killing themselves? Do they have a plan? Do they have the means? Those are questions that will not suggest them doing something. It can prevent them from doing something. It's really important to be able to ask that. It's important to be able to ask them if they're using drugs. Be forthright. It doesn't mean that they will tell you, but be forthright. And then you may have avenues of being able to help them.
You offer up some great resources that those were very helpful. The idea for some parents to actually have that conversation about, would you hurt yourself? Would you take that to the next level? Whatever. That conversation is super hard for some parents to have. And I think part of it is they don't want to know.
Or they're scared. They're scared to know.
Certainly.
Some parents mistakenly think they're scared they're going to suggest such a thing, which is not true.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, it's just helping people understand that actually suicide is usually an impulsive act that has been thought about for quite some time, but impulsive in a moment. It is often a person has a means around, and that asking them is a way to prevent the attempt from happening, and and making it clear to them that this means they have a treatable mental health condition.
Yeah.
In other words, they are so depressed that this is clinical depression. It is a biological process. It is treatable, with medication and additionally, hopefully, psychotherapy. And you will help them find someone, and they don't have to feel like this. They won't feel like this. Give them a hopeful avenue. Help them find that hopeful avenue. Most people that have thought about or even attempted but survived suicide are so relieved that they ended up on the other side and, found a way to feel better.
Okay. I am going to shift gears just a little bit. What strategies are there to get the grown child to move out of the parent's home? And
yeah, this has become more complicated than just psychiatry, to be honest with you, because many people have fallen on very difficult economic times. And it has, become more common for kids to move back home because they are not earning enough to put any money away, and survive. And I think, first of all, obviously, it's important to teach children about money early, which many parents don't do. And so making your child financially savvy, should we say, what it takes, which they often don't really comprehend till it's kind of late in the game. And they aren't laying the groundwork, to have the kind of job that will support an independent life. So, really in adolescent years, educating your child about what it will take, what kind of budget you do have, and because then they move home and they're not thinking about what food costs, what electricity costs, what, all of these various, right. And they couldn't make it. But so it is the goal for them to be financially independent human beings, just as they would be independent in other ways too. If they are at home, you should be charging them. You should be looking at what they're making, taking rent, taking, contribution to food. You should be creating a structure that makes them responsible human beings, that doesn't make it easy for them to go blow it all in a bar at night, which is going to make you furious as they're living at home. And, you enter this like terrible cycle of mutual anger. So, it's very much one thing if your child is in your home saving and contributing to the home so that they are making the goal to leave. And it's very much a child who feels like they're just, in your view and problem in reality, sort of freeloading and making it impossible for you to retire and have saved your nest egg, et cetera, or have freedoms of certain sorts. So it is, it's frequent discussions of not shaming them, but of putting together plans with goals that are about, because the question you're asking me is usually asked by people who haven't talked with their kid about this at all. They're just like, how the hell do we get you out?
Right.
In their minds, right? But there's not been some ongoing productive discussion about a plan of how that will happen. And it just makes a child feel rejected, which is not really what it's about, although it may ultimately become about that because you're feeling resentful. So it's sort of our mission, right, as parents, was to help you to become an independently functioning adult who could live independently, choose to have a partner or not, choose to have children or not, support a family or not, but independently, and you're not there yet. So like, this is a goal. This is a mission, not like, I hate having you here, Right.
And it's not too late to empower the child. So and I do understand that sometimes, kids fall on hard times and maybe they're still on the family health plan. God forbid, still on the family cell phone plan.
A lot of things have changed. A lot of things have changed since your generation. You sort of say, well, I did X. Why can't you do it too? Some things have changed. Health insurance is not what health insurance cost when you started getting health insurance.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, depending on the kind of employment we're talking about, lots of areas don't make relative to, inflation and home ownership what it was. So that is why this phenomenon is so much more common. But also the expectation of what it means to be an adult. There's been a lot of blurring. Adulthood has been very delayed by college, so early 20s, which, decades ago was like, you are an adult, done, has a big blur line now. And so I think all of these things have contributed to sort of the delayed launch. But if there is a problem psychologically with your child launching, they feel afraid, they feel ill-equipped. They feel they haven't got what it takes. They feel overly attached to you and your protective cocoon, etc. Therapy can be really helpful.
Yeah.
Why is that going on? What are the messages they're telling themselves that they haven't got it? Are you contributing to that at all? Are you in any way not giving them the message they so can do it? They are so equipped. They so have the tools and the abilities to do this on their own. That's important as well.
Oh, I'm loving this topic. And I like what you're saying here. I know quite a few people who really resent the way they were parented. And they're my age. And they still talk about how much they just not hate their parents, but resent their parents. How can a parent in that situation move forward with their adult child to get past that?
You mean the parent who is resented?
Yes.
Uh-huh. So I think, as I said, every parent makes certain kinds of mistakes vis-a-vis that child, or they weren't objective mistakes, but they are not good memories for that child, no matter how old they are. And I think that, unfortunately, parents usually get caught up in justifying and feeling defensive, feeling hurt and angry every time or any time their child points out what they consider to have been the terrible injustice. And I think that it's really helpful to be able to say some form of to your child, I recognize I am not a perfect person. And therefore, I could not have been, nor do I really believe many people are perfect parents. I tried my best. I tried my best. I loved you deeply. I really tried to do the best that I could. And that doesn't mean that it was perfect or great in of course, I'm sorry for anything that hurt you. And I think it's hard for parents to say that. And, I'm sorry for things that hurt you doesn't mean you were a bad parent, and you did a bad job and you were cruel or something, that you don't feel. But it means acknowledging and understanding and letting your child feel heard, that some things remain somewhat painful for them. But then I think it's also okay to tell your child ruminating over this or holding you today responsible and in some way trying to punish you over and over again for something that you can't go back in time and change. You can only acknowledge and be sorry if it hurt them, because that's not what you wanted. And that you really, try to do your best, that the continued rumination, punishment is only making it hard for you to have a current, better relationship. And you'd love that. You'd love to try to have as good a relationship as you can have. And so you're not sure what they hope to gain by that. If they feel like they can't stop cycling it in their mind, maybe therapy would be helpful for them. That would be understandable to you. And parents would rarely ever say that. They would be like, you have to go to therapy over something I did as a parent? Like, how insulting, no. So I'm really trying to talk about a mix of being not defensive and understanding, and at the same time saying, but just beating me with it over and over again is just harming us today.
Yeah.
So know that I'm sorry. Know that I can't go back in time and change something, or I would. Know that I love you and I want us to have a better relationship. So I'm acknowledging certain things. But from your side, please understand that repeating and repeating, you did this, or, is not repairing anything. I've already said I'm sorry. I hope that you can forgive. I know you won't forget, but I hope that you can forgive, and we could try to move forward with a healthier relationship.
That question actually came from a listener. And I think, according to her, she said she has offered for them to go to therapy together. Child's like, no, because it's not my problem. This is your problem, kind of a thing. So I think.
So if something is currently going on, sometimes a child is trying to tell a parent and it's still happening, and a parent won't hear it.
Mm-hmm.
Saying we should go to therapy together isn't a terrible idea, but saying, look, at this juncture, give me examples of the dynamic that you're finding ongoingly difficult. Because I'm willing to make change. I'm willing to try to make change. But I don't, I need to understand, what did I say today that hurt you, that you feel like has been the thing? I think, you need that information. You have to be willing to have the information to be able to make. And, what's really helpful is that if a child says it, there is something called mirroring conversations that are very helpful, where you sit together, one of you says something, the other says, what I think I heard you say is, and then you say what you think you heard them say. Then the other person gets a chance to say, well, not exactly. It was more like this and this and this. So that you really are communicating, you're empathizing, you're showing, you're listening to each other, you're understanding, and you can make some changes in a healthy way. It's hard. You have to be willing to listen and accept that someone might be telling you something that feels like their truth. It doesn't feel exactly like your truth. You have to be willing to take that in.
Yeah, it's making yourself a little vulnerable, right?
It's definitely making yourself vulnerable.
Yeah, you got to take that wall down.
And parents, it's hard, right? When you were a parent of a little kid, you're not vulnerable at all. Like you're the chief. You're the, you are the king. You say it goes, it's adult relationships can't be like that. Right. And it can be really hard to realize that you have to be willing to be vulnerable. You have to be willing to accept certain things, make certain changes. There may be limits to the relationship, to how close you can be. So if a parent, for example, of an adult child is truly being toxic, is constantly critical of the spouse, critical of the grandkids, does things the parent asks them not to do with their children, is destructive, verbally abusive, has been asked to stop doing that, pointing out what they're doing that is painful and not working. This is how estrangement happens. And I would go a long, long road of trying to repair before I ever would recommend estrangement. But I will tell you, there are definitely certain circumstances in which a child needs to separate from a parent.
Yeah.
And it's painful. But if a parent is truly destructive to that child in an ongoing way, despite it being pointed out and being asked to make a change, they are unwilling, they cannot, they do not. Sometimes there's mental illness involved, or there's serious characterologic problems involved. Sometimes there's substance abuse of a parent involved. If a parent is taking your money, taking your self-esteem, taking your, then sometimes the child has to be estranged.
And I appreciate you addressing the flip side of that, because there is two sides to every story. And I do have this question, and this came from a listener. How do you handle a child's disapproval of you? Your adult child is flat out rude and disrespectful to you, rolls their eyes at you, even as an adult, and they treat you like dirt. Is there some kind of childhood trauma or mental health issue to blame? What do you typically see in your practice?
An angry child who has not, and could there be mental illness involved? There could be, but not necessarily. It could be that your child is very, doesn't even know what they're angry about anymore, right? But they are angry. They blame you for whatever it may be. And it is helpful to try to say, look, I find that you say this rude thing to me. Don't pull out everything of the past, okay? When you discuss this kind of thing, the baby in the bathwater is not helpful. It's more helpful to be in the moment. They're over, it happens. You say, look, you seem really angry. You just said to me this rude thing. It's not the first time. It's like the way that it is often. Or you rolled your eyes. It makes me feel, instead of saying you're a jerk, you're a rude person, you're a bad person, you say, it makes me feel, I feel dismissed, hurt. Whatever are the feelings that you're saying, really, it makes me feel that you certainly don't care about me, but also that you want me to feel. I'm feeling so incredibly hurt by this. And I don't want to continue it, but I'm left to assume that you are very angry at me or angry about something. Can we talk about what is it, if I own something, I would like to understand what that is. Your child might not be able to, and you don't have to do it at this moment, but could you think about it? And could we meet up? And could you, think about what is making you feel like calling me an ex? Or, could you think about what it is? Let me know if there's something that we can, try to resolve, try to understand. But I think I have also, I want to be treated as a human being also. I'm not asking to be treated better than you would want to be treated. But I'm pretty sure that if I said those things to you or, rolled my eyes at you, that you would feel the same way and wouldn't want that. So I'm asking for just reasonable self-respect. If you get into the whole, like, I'm your father or I'm your mother and you will respect, you've lost the content.
We know that never works.
It doesn't work. But if you just say, I'm a human being who loves you and cares deeply for you. And this really, really is hurting me. And so I just, I want to understand. I want to see if we can change this. I want to understand if there's something I don't know about that's driving your feeling that I can work on. But I need you to know that it really hurts me.
You said some great things in there that I guarantee you I have listeners that are writing this down as you were saying that, because we all look for those words to try to, so that we don't just sound eloquent, but that we're effective in what we're trying to communicate.
It's always, as soon as you say you, the other person's on the defensive, yes. Right? You've just accused me of something. If you say I feel, it's not creating that defensive posture, but it's still communicating the information that, of what is happening in that dynamic that is so problematic. I don't think that a parent should just be like, oh, that's fine. I don't think a parent should just roll over and be treated badly. And in fact, I think that you're allowing the potential for a child to do that to other people in their life, which is not good. You don't have good relationships when that's how you treat people. And to some degree saying, like, I don't think this is good for either of us. Anybody you would talk to this way would be hurt and feel terrible and not want to be around you. So I think, it's not a good model for them, but also, like, you have a right as a parent to not accept that kind of behavior. If your child keeps coming and doing that, you can say, you know what? I think that you should go now.
Yeah.
I love you, but that just hurt me deeply. And I think that, we should not stay together for this visit.
Right. And because I agree with you. I think if a child is that, like, ungrateful and moody with a parent, that they may be doing that in other aspects of their life to other people. And
if they are so moody, as you said, then it may be there is a mental health thing going on. I will tell you, particularly in men, depression is often not diagnosed, and the person doesn't know that they have it because it presents as irritability and anger, much more so than women. Women can have that too, but men even more so. So if this is a change, if your son wasn't like this and now he's being like this, then I would be concerned about a mental health issue, substance abuse or something else going on in his life or clinical depression. So the question is, has it always been like this or is this a change?
There are a lot of mothers out there, obviously, who are dealing with a difficult child on a daily basis. You've seen it in your own practice. How do they stay supportive of the child while still maintaining some boundaries and some self-care?
It's just that. It is, as I said, it's not being so overly identified that you can't have yourself if your child's not happy. That is not healthy. So it is contributing to trying to be helpful, but not in your mind all day long, every day. So it is, I have a thought, I have an idea, I think this is something could be helpful. I'm going to share it with you. And then, I know that you have the ability to do this, do these things, help yourself. I want you to, I'm here if you would like me to do something, be with you, talk with you. And then when you hang up, you need to continue to build and have your sources of pleasure in life, your plans for your future, your other relationships. You need to have those things.
Yeah, I so agree with you. And on that note, what is one of your own pillars of self-care? What's something that you try to practice often for yourself?
Well, I will say, being a practitioner doesn't make you perfect parent either. And doesn't make you not have these struggles at all either. So I'm sympathetic on a personal level as well. So I do try to think about, not being so, consumed, even though, as much as I have loved my career, parenting has been the greatest joy, in many ways in my life, which means you have a lot of suffering too. So I do think about these things. I think it's important, I have good women friends. I work, to maintain those, not a plethora, but like important close ones that are really intimate and vulnerable and where, trust has been built and so on. That is important, I think. I think a lot about, maintaining. I have a 36-year-old marriage, and I think about maintaining that. We do fun things, that is big self-care for me. Saturday night dinner out, planning a fun vacation, playing with my partner is, to me, I think to a lot of people, an important aspect of self-care to have playtime.
Yeah.
And, I allow myself to continue indulging great curiosities in whatever format that, exploring, because I am a very curious person. So reading something I'm curious about, watching something I'm curious about, immersing myself in some content I find to be cool is important to me. And I mean, I'm not like a gym lady by any stretch, but I do think exercise is important for mental health.
Absolutely.
And I do, walking a lot, running, or, I do weightlifting. I think mentally it's important as well as physically. So have your playthings that you invest in is a good way, I think, to keep some sort of balance.
Thank you for all that, because it really supports what I do in my health coaching. So thank you for that. Dr. Gail Saltz, where can our listeners find you and also your books?
Oh, great. Well, I am on Twitter at Dr. Gail Saltz, DR. I am at Instagram at Dr. Gail Saltz. I have a website at drgailsaltz.com. And there is the podcast, How Can I Help, at with iHeartMedia, that is available at Apple, Spotify, and every place you get your podcasts. And the last book, The Power of Different, The Link Between Disorder and Genius, which I referred to early on, is available everywhere you get your books. But I think for anybody who has struggled with, is struggling with, for any parent who's a child with any sort of mental health difference or learning disability, and educators, I think it's very helpful to understand that even though you definitely can suffer mightily with these things, don't want to minimize that. And it is really important to get treatment so that you can suffer less. There are potential strengths that are more than the general population. And it's really important to know what those are and to try to play to those strengths or encourage your child to play to those strengths for self-esteem and a successful life. So, yeah. Okay. So I think it's the interest of those populations. Yeah.
Dr. Gail Saltz, this was very enlightening. And I am so happy that we were able to connect and really discuss this meaty topic.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. I am so grateful for the ratings and reviews from our listeners. Did you know that your reviews help other people find Asking for a Friend? If you like what you hear, won't you please leave a review on Spotify or Apple? Thank you from the bottom of my heart.